Welcome back to Chocolate Fever. Today we're going to read chapter 5 of Chocolate Fever. Things are really starting to get interesting. Henry is now broken up in little brown spots from the head to his tippy toes, and they're starting to make popping sounds, and they're getting bigger and bigger, and he is very worried. He is very frightened. He is not sure what's going on. So let's see if we can find out. Calling Dr. Fargo. Chapter 5. In later years, Henry couldn't remember who screamed first. All he could recall was that both he and Mrs. Kimball-Farber were yelling their heads off, and that Nurse Molly Farthing was cool as a cantaloupe. "Calm down now, both of you," she said. "Mrs. Kimball-Farber, you go and call Mrs. Green on the telephone. Tell her we're taking Henry to the city hospital." Mrs. Kimball-Farber didn't move. She just stood there with her mouth open, staring at Henry. "You scoot now," insisted Miss Nurse Farthing in a stern tone. "Swoosh! Off with you!" "And you, Henry Green," she said, as Mrs. Kimball-Farber left the room, "you are coming with me. Let's go. Quietly, calmly." She took his hand, and once again Henry noticed that it felt good and somehow made him feel better. He kept holding her cool hand as they left the school. All the way to the hospital, as the taxi sped along, Henry held fast to the calm, steady hand of Nurse Molly Farthing. In fact, it wasn't until he had been checked by 2 different doctors and was waiting to be examined by the hospital's chief in children's medicine, Dr. Fargo, that he dared to let go. What? Said Dr. Fargo as he came bounding into the examining room. He was a small, round man with a bushy white mustache and a confused look on his face. "What have we here, huh?" he asked. "Boy looks like he fell in a mud puddle." He leaned down close to Henry's nose that Henry could smell his puffy breath. It smelled like peppermints. "Didn't fall in a mud puddle, did you, lad?" "No, sir." "Didn't think so," said Dr. Fargo. "Too bad. Would have explained those big brown spots all over you." "Well then," he said, turning to Nurse Molly Farthing, "tell me things." "You're not going to believe this, Doctor," Nurse Farthing began as she told Dr. Fargo about the events of the morning. "I am not going to believe this," Dr. Fargo repeated. When she had finished, "It's impossible. No rash in the whole history of rashes ever appeared so fast, or grew so big, or popped out with the noise you could hear. Impossible." "It happened," said Nurse Farthing. "So I see. Well, soon get to the bottom of this, or my name's not, what is my name? By the way." "Dr. Fargo, I believe," said Henry. "Pleased to meet you, son," said Dr. Fargo, and he shook Henry's hand. "Ought to do something about those big brown spots, though." "Yes, sir," said Henry, who was beginning to feel confused himself. Dr. Fargo took Henry to the examining table and switched on the big lamp. For a full 5 minutes, he had nothing but and ha as he poked and prodded Henry. He looked at every big brown spot and at all the bare spots in between the brown spots. He looked with a magnifying glass and without a magnifying glass, in Henry's eyes and his ears and his nose and even under his tongue. Finally, he said, "I don't know any more than when I started. They looked just like your typical big brown spots. Except, of course, in the whole history of civilized world, there has never been a case of big brown spots before." "I'm frightened," said Henry. "I'm Dr. Fargo," said the doctor. "That much I know. Now, what I'd like to do is get to know more about those big brown spots of yours." He wet the tip of a cotton swab and brushed it gently against one of the big brown spots on Henry's right arm. "Ouch!" said Henry. "Did that hurt?" "No." "Then why did you say ouch?" Because, said Henry, I thought it was going to hurt. I see, said Dr. Fargo, shaking his head. Then he put the cotton swab into a glass jar. Take this to the laboratory at once, he said to one of the assistants, and the man rushed out of the room. In a few minutes, we will all know more about those big brown spots of yours, the doctor said. Hands behind his back, he began to pace the room. Suddenly, he stopped, his nose in the air. Who's been eating a candy bar in my office? He demanded. No one answered. Dr. Fargo's nose twitched from side to side as he sniffed the air. I smell candy, he said. Someone's been eating a candy bar. Just then, the telephone rang and Dr. Fargo bounded across the room to answer it. What? He answered the phone. Are you sure? His white mustache bounced up and down as Dr. Fargo sank slowly into the chair. He put the telephone down, a look of amazement on his face. Chocolate, he said. Those big brown spots are pure chocolate. Chocolate? Gasped Nurse Farling. Chocolate? Exclaimed Henry Green. Chocolate? Echoed Dr. Fargo's two assistants. Exactly, said Dr. Fargo. This boy, it seems, is nothing more than a walking candy bar. And that is the end of chapter 5. Hope you enjoyed. Come back for more.